Do you notice anything strange about this picture? This is from a 9-car pileup in Alabama today. And I noticed that this car seems very unburnt compared to this one and this one. And that this one seems to have its engine block area destroyed and the rest of the car relatively unburnt. This is from an aerial footage. I'll include the link in the description. And this happened while it was raining during a tropical storm. That there was this pileup of cars, and I'll go over a couple more of the still shots of how the cars burned so thoroughly. But how did this car end up so unburned in the middle of this car, and this tractor trailer? And the implication to me is that there was plasma involved in this. And I'll show you a few more instances that this reminds me of and some other evidence that I've discovered relating thereto. And why I believe it is attracted toward these roadways because of the underground fiber optic cable, sewer, water, and electrical lines that are buried under them. But that still doesn't answer why one car seems to fare so well compared to the others. I'll include the link in the description. You can check it out for yourself. It's pretty obvious though, right? Something happened there. It wasn't just fire, and it seemed like that one car had protection. A plasma bubble force field dome around it. There's also something else I'll point out. Scorch marks down here. That's as far as it'll let me zoom in. But you see the scorch marks I'm talking about. Right along in here. I don't know what kind of material this is here, but it's definitely scorched, and it looks like this truck might have even received some damage. But it's definitely scorched along there, as well as up along here, along the same wall that runs back to here, runs up and underneath the freeway, and it's scorched all along here. Here's the scorch marks. There was no cars there. And it runs here. Sorry for the crappy footage, I'm just trying to show you what I see real quick. So this whole wall right here is scorched, and then it runs up and under, and around here it's also scorched. And again, this car remains untouched between this one, and the trailer. Let that soak in, man. It's a brain bender. It won't let me go further than that. So let's go through some of the others real quick. Oops. The pileup happened during Tropical Storm Claudette, is what that says if I had it where you could see it. So here's a after, and there's before. And you can see this same truck, the semi-truck and the black truck before, when they're already piled up, and then after. This wheel right here is that semi-truck wheel. So you can see that they all crashed there. And as this truck is a Facebook video by Ricky McCall, as he's driving by, you can see big plumes of smoke coming up. And as you can see, their engine block suffered more. I'm going to talk more about what I think this is. So you can see it was raining. As this guy drove by, there's his windshield wiper. Again, the windshield wiper. And that's what it looks like afterwards. Approximately the same angle. So here's a shameless plug. The links in the description are to this video called "The Silent 9/11 Still Goes Unnoticed, a New Pearl Harbor worldwide to unite us all in our shared fate." And as you can see, these cars suffered a similar fate, and I'm going to talk about how I think roadways actually attract this energy. But as you can see, the first link in the description is Arming Firefighters with the White Hot Sword of Truth, where I actually stop and talk to some firefighters at one of these fires where I can see the plasma has happened, along with the Department of Defense announcing that long-range fires are produced by these directed energy weapons. My very next upload is going to be of a fire, remnants of a fire that I filmed in the middle of a freeway where it was obvious a vehicle had burned, and it was obvious there was a plasma fire by the remnants of the weeds, where they all burned on the inside of each patch of weeds, leaving a ring of unburnt weeds around the outer edge of each patch of weeds. This tells me it was plasma fire. Where I filmed this in the middle of the freeway last week, it was obvious a vehicle had burned. If they happened simultaneously, the vehicle burned due to plasma fire. That will be my very next upload. Back to the links in the description, there will be part 1 and part 2 of The Silent 9/11 Still Goes Unnoticed. This is the thumbnail photo of one of them. This is the cheesy thumbnail photo of part 2, which we'll watch part of now. This is the beginning of a video I made, part number 2 of The Silent 9/11 Goes Still Unnoticed. These are the burnt cars in the middle of the street in Spain and Portugal. And the links to the original videos are in the description of these. Crack the magnetic field. We're going to crack the magnetic field. We're going to part number 2. Pure gravy.
So I've said before that when they cracked the magnetic field, my brother-in-law saw a flashing bright star during the day while the fires were going in Spanish Fork. They can charge the fiber optic lasers for free when the magnetic field is cracked open and the solar plasma is flowing in, and direct it. Otherwise, the natural phenomenon is something more like what you saw with the straight line burning across the field, where a magnetic flux line is moving across the ground. And I think in some cases, they're actually directing it out into the rural areas in the wilderness so that it doesn't ground out. This could just be a natural filament grounding out right here between the earth and the sky, or it could be directed. But I believe there is evidence of what appears to be both. Non-directed random energy and directed energy.
Look at those saplings down there. They didn't burn.
Is he talking about the people here, the saplings?
The vehicles, the cars are completely
How dare he
melted,
talk about them like that?
And yet these little twigs and stuff, they didn't burn. And yet the fire was supposed to have reached the cars from the trees.
How dare he?
Look at this car, it's melted into the road.
And that's the other thing. We might have an explanation why these cars were all flipped over in some of these fires. Here's an example. How did it get up there? Maybe the person drove it up there. But in some of these fires, right where they were parked, they were flipped 180 degrees. And if magnetic flux lines are moving under the ground in current, in oscillating waves, and you get a positive over here and a negative over here, I'll bet people that watch these cars flipped over, watched them go flip 180 degrees so quick, they could hardly even see it. And it immediately stopped. It didn't keep tumbling, because just like when you push two magnets together and it flips the other magnet 180 degrees very quickly and then stops it just as quickly, I'll bet that's how these cars moved. From the electromagnetic flux lines moving under the ground with these types of fires.
Even the tarmac and the road is melted, given way. And yet the trees have still got bark on them, look. Now this is a directed energy weapon.
A Dusky that hits the engine compartment the hardest. On all of them.
The engine's completely exposed.
Right, the engine on all of them gets hit hardest.
Branches all perfectly intact.
Hey, this guy's talking over me. He needs to...
I know, they both need to shut up, both those guys. So we saw this on Christmas morning of this last Christmas in Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'll include another link in the description where there was a guy in Vermont, Johnson, Vermont, showing that there was vehicle fires happening in his local area that were coming up on the news, and he thought it was like BLM Antifa, and he's like, I know how they're getting in here, they're taking the I-15 exit and coming in and splitting out of town before anyone knows what happens. And I show some of the evidence of the burn patterns that indicates to me it's more plasma fire.
Shut up.
Burnt away.
Okay. Well, I tell you about the engine compartment hit on all of them the hardest.
The road. Okay.
Yeah.
It's directed energy.
The Dusky.
Microwave beam weapon.
Microwave beam weapon.
Above.
I gotta add my bloviation so that I can... The rust color. Notice the rust. How did it rust instantly?
Brought down the Twin Towers.
On the outside even. On the inside, everywhere. That was a perfectly painted car.
Since at least the 1920s. They've been sitting on it, keeping it.
The technology, he means, since the 20s. That car is
what he's trying to say is that the rust happens as like a form of electrolysis that normally takes a long time using water to rust. But in this case, it uses the smoke as a medium for ion exchange. And the process of electrolysis happens very quickly. And it's like the corrosion that happens on your battery terminal, where the electricity is flowing through the terminal and it builds up that corrosion very quickly. That's what happens on the side of these on the metal of these cars that are in these plasma fires. It instantly rusts everywhere. On 9/11, we saw this as well as dustification. Judy Woods showed us that there was the Cheeto effect, where large beams were sticking out of the rubble, rusted, looking like giant Cheetos because they were covered in rust. Something about this process that makes it happen very quickly.
Brand new. So are all those cars. Brand new, but rusted. Fire doesn't rust cars.
Intact.
Microwaves do.
Trees
Electrolysis.
just lying there. Look at that. All those leaves are still on the trees.
All the twigs over
And
here.
yet the intense heat was so intense that
and the
it
leaves on the
destroyed this
trees.
vehicle.
And the intense heat on the vehicle.
I apologize.
I'm narrating. What? I'm narrating.
I apologize for this guy. That's my rude other voice in my head. I don't care what they say about you. The other voice in my head thinks you're alright. Okay.
My people can't hear it. I gotta translate for my people. It's a truther thing. You wouldn't understand. All the
Okay,
greenery.
and again, look, we have the trees perfectly intact.
More greenery.
Not damaged.
Greenery.
The leaves are all there.
Not greenery.
And yet the vehicle...
Okay, so you can watch more of that. Let's go to how it's in the road. I believe the road attracts this energy. Okay, here's how the road attracts the energy. My big claim to fame, this was from my very first plasma fire that I went and investigated in Spanish Fork, Utah, which is no longer available. It got wiped out with my first page. It was before I knew anything about plasma fire. It was actually the very first thing I ever discovered. As I walked up on it, it was situated about like it is now, with pure ash in between, where it had turned the material that it is right here and right here into pure ash. And if I could get my shadow out of the way, fiber optic cable buried below. So I'm going to show you the end of this and be able to show you that was planted in the ground. It was sticking up on the edge of the trench. The trench runs this way. The fiber optic cable is buried here. They put one of those on the edge of the trench so that the next operator knows to come not dig right there. When the fire happened, that flopped over and got lasered in half, right where the fiber optic cable runs under the ground. Okay, so this is the side that was facing up. And the intensity of the heat between here and here that increased to such a degree that it turned it to ash, just pure ash. I mean, like the finest of dust. From here to here probably was about 18 inches. It was a bit longer than that. It was maybe that long. And it was turned to ash between those 2 points. And for it to have reached that intensity of a heat and then taper off to nearly nothing right here means it was like a wall of energy, like a curtain of electricity coming up right here in alignment with that fiber optic cable. And so I believe things that are buried under the road, everything from fiber optic cable to electrical cable to water, sewer, and gas lines, work like antenna to draw the electricity to the road, which may be part of what we're seeing. Okay, this is the beginning of part 1 of the Silent 9/11 Goes On. But as you just heard me say, I believe there's evidence of both natural and directed uses and random releases of this energy. So that's his title, Terrarium Firma. His links are in the description of Silent 9/11 Goes On, which are in the description of this video. My title is Silent 9/11 Still Goes On, A New Pearl Harbor Worldwide to Unite Us. His title is Greek Wildfires, Evidence of Directed Energy Weapons. And as I just said, my very next upload is going to be of evidence of a fire that was in the middle of the road, middle of the freeway, between the two directions, of a fire that burned a vehicle and that is provably plasma fire based on the vegetation and the way that that burned around it. And if they happen simultaneously, then it's evidence of a vehicle burned by a plasma fire in the middle of a road that I recorded last week while I was driving. Keep that in mind at all times.
In this following video, I think it's important that we document and record this and mirror it and save it wherever you can, because it's harder and harder to find on the search engines these days, even when you know what to Google for. But I want you to think of it in terms of the day the world stood still, when the Martians arrived, and the shot heard round the world was these new fangle-dangled directed energy weapons from he who showed the world that he can draw fire down from the heavens as it was described in the Bible would be the case.
Hello, people. I want to cover the Greek wildfires this time. Whole world has been burning up last couple of years. Portugal, California, and now Greece. This is an article from 24th of July 2018. So it's pretty up to date. That's the date we are on today when I'm recording this. So there's American military drones involved, supposedly, hunting for the criminal arsonists. Why the Americans would be there is anyone's guess. I mean, hasn't Greece got its own drones? Why does it need drones? Why can't it use helicopters? Very strange. So it's exactly the same story as what happened in Northern California. Now, if we examine the pictures here, we see the same thing what I noticed in Portugal. The trees with the very thin twigs and branches are still intact. I mean, they look a bit black, but they're not consumed by the fire. The metal
So he goes through and details out the rest of what there is to be able to be seen. Link will be in the description where you can watch the rest of his videos. Terrarium Firma. The chicks dig him. They love the accent. Okay, I'm just going to shut the hell up and let him tell you. I'm trying to learn from the last time I did this. I was just as big of a jerk.
Portugal. The trees with the very thin twigs and branches are still intact. I mean, they look a bit black, but they're not consumed by the fire. The metal cars, which should be less flammable than the twigs, cars are consumed by the fire. So there's a telegraph pole. Looks a bit charred, but it's mostly intact. There's some twigs. They're charred, but intact, not consumed. Now look at this. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. Check out this car here, this VW Golf, next to the man. The car is intact. And the leaves here, notice the leaves are still on the tree. So this is
Are you seeing the similarities? Notice how highly damaged the engine block is. Like I was saying in that other video, the engine block, the energy locks onto the mass, the biggest mass. Like I was describing the other day, using a potato in the microwave and a bread roll. The densest piece will attract the most microwave energy. And let's not forget the burnage right here, scorching along here. I don't know, this looks like it's probably covered in cement. So how did that scorch? And it goes clear down to here. Let's make sure and get that in the frame without looking too doofy. This part is all scorched. A big dark spot there, a dark spot there, and another dark spot down here on the corner. Likewise all along here. So, I'm pretty sure this burning here of this car, and the reason it got the engine block so much hotter than the rest of the car, has to do with this scorching down here and this scorching down here. And it was all part of the same energy release, be it directed or otherwise. Why else is there an unburnt car in the middle of that carnage? Fire don't do that. How did this car sit here and watch this car burst into flames on this side of it, and this car burst into flames on this side of it, yet it stayed in the middle untouched? I think we're looking at some phenomena.